Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the first ever edition of the MMA Breakdown Podcast. I'm your host, Simon Shelby, and just before we get into the actual contents of today's episode, there's just a few little bits and bobs that I want to address just before we actually get into what the podcast is. I'd just like to go over why I'm starting this podcast in the first place, and what I also hope to achieve with this podcast. Just a quick apology as well for my voice. It's not usually this bad, I hope. I am just recovering from a cold, so my voice isn't as clear as it usually is, and there's going to be a lot of cuts in this as well. Just because obviously I'll need to stop to cough, sneeze, and take a drink of water. Hopefully by the next episode of the podcast, this will be different. Now, as you're probably aware, there are probably millions of podcasts now. You know, the medium of podcasting has grown significantly over the last few years. It's a medium in which a lot of people like to enjoy on their commute, whether they're at the gym or just simply at home in bed or of a morning. And you know, I'm one of these people. I'm one of these people that really enjoy podcasts and what they have to offer, and the medium that they offer. Not only the consumer, but the people who are doing the podcast themselves. So one of my goals for starting this podcast is so that I can give the MMA community a medium in which they can discuss what MMA fans really want to hear about, and in an entertaining manner. A lot of podcasts out there in the MMA community they don't always report the facts, and they don't always report the news correctly, and I don't think they give an in-depth look into what the story that they are talking about can really go. You know, there are layers to that they are now touching on, and they're just rehashing what's already been said elsewhere, and I don't like that myself. So I thought, if you can't fix it, you know, try and do it yourself. So that's what I want to do right here. I want to start a podcast where not only I can share my views, but anyone within the MMA community can come onto this platform and we can discuss the real shit that's going down in the MMA community, and we can fully flesh out every school of thought, every opinion on it, and we can critique it, or we can discuss them and see the flaws or see the benefits in it. On top of that, I also want to give an in-depth and thought-provoking take on the news. Like I said previously, I don't think a lot of podcasts out there go into as much detail as is necessarily warranted on certain issues. You know, a lot of people just rehash what's already been said or other people have reported. And I think that we need people to have a more in-depth and analytical look at some of the things that go on to really give an insight into what's actually occurring within the community itself. And that's what I want this platform to be. I want this a platform where anyone can come onto this podcast and discuss what they want to do. They can debate me, they can call me a piece of shit, they can call whoever else on this podcast a piece of shit, as long as they can back it up with cold hard evidence of facts. And obviously most of the time the discussions on here will be based around MMA, most likely UFC. Just some more housekeeping just before we get into the episode. The artwork that you're seeing on screen right now, I have had permission to use this. On the screen right now, there is a screenshot of the DMs that I spoke to DOSBRAK. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name, but I have had permission from him to use his artwork, so a big shout out to him. I've also will be crediting all the music and all other artwork that's used in the video version and in the audio version of the podcast, and that will all be linked down in the description down below. On today's podcast, it's going to be a combination of clips that I've gathered from the free podcast that I was on last month. A big shout out and a lot of love over to everyone that was allowed me to come onto their podcast. This was the first ever podcast that I had ever done. I was fortunate enough that the platform that I have now over on Instagram, that I am being invited onto podcasts, and I'm also being accepted when I apply to go on them. And every conversation I had on there, I very much enjoyed, and the people that I met, they are very nice, and I'm glad to have met them and been on their podcasts. Some of them did really well, and I hope to have them on here or go back on their podcasts in the future. Just some thoughts on the podcasts themselves. The variety of formats I found very interesting. Some of the podcasts that I went on, they were very formatted, and others were very open-ended. Personally, I prefer the open-ended medium rather than an overly formatted one, as I feel that I'm a very opinionated person, and I think an overly formatted one doesn't allow me to fully flesh out ideas and conversations that you're having with people. It just seems to cut off at an unnatural point, and I think that if you leave the format very open-ended and you don't leave yourself on a time constraint, you can fully flesh out that conversation and it develop more naturally into other topics that you want to cover. I'm also very prone to ranting, which I've noticed as well, and you will probably come to realize later on in the podcast. Something else that you'll probably notice on the different podcasts is I change from podcast to podcast as well. I'm fairly new to podcasting. This is the first time I've ever done this, where I've just sat in front of a microphone and just spoke about MMA. A lot of the time it's been over text, and when I was doing the podcast, I was a little nervous. The first time I did it with MMA on the Rocks, I was a little bit nervous. I was not as prepared as I probably should have been, and that shows in the podcast itself. My confidence is a little bit all over the place, and my speech isn't as clear as it probably is now. It's probably not perfect now, but over the coming weeks and months, that will probably improve tremendously, and you'll probably come to enjoy what I have to say once I eventually learn to be able to speak a lot more clearly and for a longer period of time. If you listen to the different podcasts, I also change, as I said, as in, in the overly formatted versions of podcasting, you don't really get to express who you are, if that makes sense. Your personality doesn't shine through as much. But when you're going to have an actual conversation with someone, you're able to actually speak more from the heart, and you're not feeling like you're doing a radio interview. So that's something to listen out for and see if you can spot which podcasts you think that you would be willing to listen to in the future. Another issue that I just want to quickly address is the Conor McGregor debate that I had on the Untitled MMA podcast. I have not purposely included this in this video because I think that tangent there went on for about 45 minutes to an hour, and I think that that's brilliant content that I think you guys will really enjoy listening to, and so you should go down in the description down below and click on their podcast and listen to that. Just to address that, in case any of you do guys listen to it and you get the wrong impression, there is no bad blood between me and the guy that we were discussing on there. We're just at opposite ends of a spectrum, and I think that we had a very interesting conversation, and this is something that I'd like to carry on in the future. So I'd like to invite those guys onto this podcast now, and I hope sometime in the future they can come onto this podcast and we can fully fledge out what we both think, and I think that we can reach some kind of middle ground. Anyways, without further ado, I think I've just covered about everything that I wanted to there. I apologise again if my voice is breaking up a little bit and it's a little bit hard to hear and a lot hard to understand in certain places, but again, I am just recovering from a cold, so my voice isn't as strong as it usually is, and I'm going to put it to rest now for the rest of the day. So I hope you guys enjoy these little clips that I've taken, and hopefully next week I will come back with my first ever guest.
Alright, so that takes us to the main event this weekend. Mm-hmm. Like I said, the main event wasn't really a surprise to anybody, I don't think.
No.
But nobody's going to be talking about...
In what way do you class as surprising? The result?
I don't think it was a surprise.
No, yeah.
I think the result wasn't a surprise. I think the performances were a bit of a surprise for me, to be honest. I was expecting Gustafsson to come out a little bit stronger than he did. I recently watched the first fight over again because I really enjoyed that fight. I was watching it retrospectively, so I wasn't actually I didn't watch it at the time.
Right.
So I rewatched the fight and I was like, oh, dude, I'm so hyped for this fight now, because if they come out like they did last time, I can't wait to watch this fight again. And with the cliche that the sequel's never as good as the first one, and that kind of what happened this time. I don't know. Gustafsson just didn't seem himself. I think something happened to him in the first round. I think he was complaining something about his leg, which may explain it. So I think a lot of people were extremely impressed with John Jones' performance, but I think his performance was good, but it wasn't what we're used to seeing with Jones. I think it was more of a case of Gustafsson wasn't on his A game, which made Jones seem better than he actually was in that fight. If that makes sense?
Yeah, I don't think either of them looked awesome, really, and they were both coming off of long layoffs too. To be totally fair, Gustafsson hadn't fought since like summer of last year, I think. But yeah, I don't think either looked impressive. But I really wasn't expecting as much from Gustafsson as everybody else was going into this fight anyway. I'm a noted Gustafsson hater, so maybe I'm looking at it from a biased perspective, but I wasn't expecting all that much from Gustafsson.
How wouldn't you be impressed with John Jones? He's coming off a, 17th month layoff. He's fighting the number 2
candidate in the division, and he fucking knocked him out in the second round or third round?
Third round, yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's impressive for me.
I think it was impressive that Jones finished him because, we've seen Jones finish guys, DC, obviously. But I don't feel like he's a known, nasty knockout guy. The fact that he got Gustafsson to the ground, took his back, flattened him out, and finished him, I think that was relatively impressive. But overall, I wasn't expecting a ton from the fight anyway. I was more excited for Nunes Cyborg than I was the main event.
Yeah, which was crazy.
Oh,
but
I totally agree.
I will say, though, that I pretty much expected it to go the way it did. I thought John Jones was going to finish him just because if you look at Mighty Mouse, who's had every type of rematch in his division during his UFC run, every time he fought a guy a second time, he was better, except Henry Cejudo. But
And this can't go unnoted that John Jones knocking out Gustafsson made me the untitled picks champ. So
yeah, the picks were tied going into that. It ended tied with Michael Chiesa, Carlos Condit, it tied the pick. So the decider was Buju went with John Jones by decision, and then Brendan had him by finish.
I took the lead with Walt winning, I think, right?
Walt Harris, yeah.
Yeah, I took the lead, and then Buju obviously tied it back up with Condit losing. So, yeah, we had to make a tiebreaker in a sense, so that's what it was.
So then back to the main event. Where does Gustafsson go from here? Because now he's in that
heavyweight
twilight zone where he's lost to the champion twice. Granted, John Jones would be going at heavyweight too. Light heavyweight's a fucking disaster anyway.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, it sounds like if he doesn't want to go up to heavyweight to fight DC, why else would he go to heavyweight if it isn't going to be to fight for a belt?
He's actually said he's not going to heavyweight. He said he's going to stay in the division and defend it. So in the post-fight press conference, he did say that the way he worded it was, I could go up to heavyweight and destroy DC up there, but this is my division. I'm going to stay here and I'm going to defend my belt. In terms of Gustafsson, there, like you said, he possibly could move up, which I think would be ideal for him in the situation in terms of stock. But there's always a couple of fights that he could always work his way back up the light heavyweight ranks, give it another shot. Maybe I don't know, off the top of my head, I can't think of anyone that I'd like to see him fight right now. But probably a move up to heavyweight would be best for him. In terms of John Jones, just stay in his division and just absolutely dominate, work his name back up. Not that he needs to work it up in terms of stock, just in terms of reputation. Every time he comes back, there's always that controversy. So maybe bring himself away from that controversy and just say, look, I'm here to defend my belt. I'm here to prove that I'm one of the best ever. And I'm going to do that by, picking up some big title defenses and carrying on my legacy like that.
The only problem...
and then...
Go ahead, sorry. You're fine. Go ahead.
And just carrying on killing it in his division and then moving up to heavyweight eventually. I can see him probably moving up in 2 years, about a year or two. So I'd say 2019, stay in his division and just absolutely dominate.
The only problem I have with him staying at 205, and I would rather he stayed at 205. I'd rather see a dominant champion than every time somebody wins a belt, they go up and fight the guy ahead of them. Mm-hmm. But he just beat Gustafsson again. Anthony Smith is number 3. That's an intriguing fight. Jones beats him. And then you got Jan Blachowicz, however you say that guy's name, we never know how. Mm-hmm. Ilir Latifi, Volkan Oezdemir, Thiago Santos. 205 is not exactly full of killers. And Jones has beat a lot of the fun matchups. Yeah. So
it is a pretty it's not the best division in the UFC by far. It's one of the weaker ones in terms of it being stacked. Which is an issue, but in terms of John Jones making a name for himself, fuck it, just keep defending that belt because that's all people will matter at the end of the day. People will pay to see John Jones fight.
Agreed.
And people will pay to see him defend that belt and win. So for him, it's probably best if he just stays there for a year or two, builds his name back up again, builds that reputation up again and confidence in the fans, and then move up to heavyweight and just do what he's got to do up there.
If he does not win a heavyweight title, can he still be a GOAT?
He can, but he's going to have to beat everybody and then the next round of young talent and beat all of them twice.
The problem with him in the greatest argument now is it's always going to be how seriously you take all of the issues that he's had. How seriously you take this latest one, 60 picograms, whatever.
And obviously, that's very
This
opinionated.
latest one's a bit fucking. I can understand the people's argument, but at the same time, it's a bit.
I don't know if it's because
in a sense because of how small it is. You know, it's been reported numerous amount of times that he had no performance enhancing benefits from it.
Right.
And it's such a small amount as well that why the fuck would you even care?
Honestly,
You know what I mean?
I really don't, because I don't know if it's because we've seen so many problems from Jones already. This feels like the 8th different kind of issue we've had with John Jones.
And this is the most mild out of all of them.
So I don't know if it's because we've already seen things like this so many times from Jones, but this one, it honestly just doesn't feel that big at all.
And to me, though, the only thing that I care about is that they said that he's been testing positive since August. So whether it started in August and has just been that, or if it's been that's just as far back as their records go for whatever reason.
Right.
I just want to know if he's been testing positive and it's been going down the last 18 months.
Right.
I just want to know everything before passing any real judgments.
It's a long-term metabolite, so it just stays in his system from whatever he was taking previously. I think in terms of people's reaction to this particular pop-in of whatever he took, it's the straw that brought the camel's back, in the sense that a lot of people already have so much discontent towards Jones already that anything that he pops for, you know, let's say for example he didn't high five you on the way back from the fucking gym, people are going to give him shit for that. If he fucking has too much sugar in his coffee in the morning, people would criticize him for that.
I agree 100%. I agree.
At the end of the day, it's such a small amount that people are overreacting to it so fucking much. Like, I mean, this was a guy that 3-4 years ago was probably snorting cocaine out of prostitutes' arseholes. You know what I mean? And now they give a shit about a 35 millionth of a gram of sand. Fuck off.
I agree with you.
You know what I mean?
Like Bryce said, this is the mildest issue we've had with Jones, but it feels like it's getting the biggest reaction for some reason. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's because of continuous John Jones issues, but like this one just does not feel like a big deal to me at all.
Also, I think part of the issues that people have with this particular issue is that it caused the UFC to have to move from Vegas to California in a week and threw a whole mess in everyone's travel arrangements, which, I mean, they don't look good for.
Well,
yeah. Where do you all stand on the idea that the testing itself has gone so far one-sided now that, you know,
USADA is hot garbage.
Say again?
USADA is hot garbage.
Why'd you say that?
I just think that I think, for one, it's not consistent because, like, there's fighters like Frank Mir. He tested positive for the same substance, give or take the same amount, and got 2 years. And they said that it would be something ingested only within the last few months, and now they're saying it can last a year and a half, and there's just a lot of inconsistencies, I feel like, and so they need to get their stuff together and post some legitimate explanations for everything.
Yeah, I feel like there has to be rules and explanations to everything. Otherwise, there's going to be controversy that whatever is going to happen. Like, if you do this, then you have to have this year-long layoff, because then there's going to be bias. Like, John Jones probably won't get suspended compared to a middle-level guy. Mm-hmm. But nothing's fair at all. So, I mean, I don't think there's going to be a big solution to any of this, honestly.
I think it's a transparency issue as well. You know, none of us really, none of the fans know a lot about the actual testing process.
Right, and the thing is, they could tell us anything, and I mean,
yeah,
right.
Especially there's no data out there that you can actually look for yourselves. You can only go through the press and what they can get,
right.
Especially from people like Jeff Nowitzki, however the fuck you say his name, whatever he tells you. So, and there's no data on the website as well that you can check and that you can actually look. You can look at who's in the testing pool itself,
right.
But you can't look at what they're actually being tested for, what they're actually popping for. Mm-hmm. You know, if, let's say, for example, a fighter's taking creatine and they're taking amino acids and a multivitamin, you don't know what they're actually taking. And I think from a company's perspective, a level of transparency might need to be introduced where the fans can actually understand how they're being tested and what fighters are actually taking. And I think from an educational perspective as well, that'll be interesting as well, because then people who are aspiring fighters or people who just have a really big interest in the sport will be able to look at what fighters are actually ingesting and taking to help them perform to a certain level, and that's legal and can be taken in professional competitions.
Yeah, the system, and I don't have the solution, honestly. Transparency, like you said, would obviously help a ton, but I just don't feel like there's anything that they can roll out right now that's going to say this fixes the problem. I think a big part of it was they jumped in head first, and they went from like basically nothing to now it's this overkill type of system that we have now. So I don't have.
Yeah, I mean, in general, if you take a step back, everything that you take is a performance enhancing drug. You know, you take whey protein, that's performance enhancing.
Right.
You take creatine, that's performance enhancing. So where you draw the line is completely arbitrary depending upon the athletic commission. So, you know, it's whether or not, you know, do we just let everyone run free reign? But then that's where the issue aligns of how far do you let people go, because then it just becomes about who can take the most drugs,
Right.
and then who's actually the certain skill level. So it's drawing the line to a degree that lets people understand what they can and can't take clearly, where that line is drawn, where the skill level and the ability to take, in inverting commas, performance enhancing drugs is right there. You find like a golden mean between skill level and performance enhancing drugs.
Right.
And I think right now we're kind of skewing towards too far one side. I can't figure out which side they're skewing too far towards. I think they're being so intense and specific right now with what they're testing for that anything anyone takes has to be completely tested to the nth degree. And it is causing some problems like we've seen now, where a fucking petagram or whatever, however you fucking say it, is causing an entire fucking event to get moved because some fuckers got popped for it.
Right.
So I think there are certain degrees that need to be kind of held back on a little bit, or a little bit of free reign needs to be given somewhere.
I agree.
But I'm not a fucking scientist. I can't tell you shit about this. I'm just grasping at straws. So I don't know. That's maybe some of the all USADA and all that need to sort out.
I feel like it would be so hard not to take a performance-enhancing drug if I'm a fighter. But I'm obviously not a fighter. I don't have professional people in my corner, professional people telling me what and what not to do. But like you said, it's the littlest things that could be a performance-enhancing drug that would be natural to take regularly if you're not a fighter, especially if you are a fighter, to get yourself in a more healthy state or whatever it is to better yourself as a fighter. Not necessarily to like steroids or something so crazy or high level that it obviously will enhance you, but something like protein milk or something like you said.
And
so
the thing
it's
is,
crazy.
The thing is, right now, even with none of us on this show right now being professional fighters, if any of us are taking any kind of vitamins or supplements or even the food we're eating, we could all have, quote unquote, these banned substances in our systems right now. And I think that's part of the problem, obviously.
And like, it definitely needs to be clarified, because like John Jones, I mean, you obviously going to have the people that like, he did this multiple times. He's doing the shit on purpose. But like you said, it could be something so little, and he honestly could not be doing it on purpose. We never know.
Right.
And somebody who claims to know what John Jones is doing purposely or not purposely, you're not right.
Yeah, it's hard to judge intent by something that is either in your blood or in your pee.
And then the other side of the John Jones argument, sure, this might not have been on purpose. It's not that significant. But how many times we had issues with John Jones?
That's the biggest thing is repetition with John Jones.
Yeah, and again, this comes back to the idea of intention. You know, you hear stories of John Jones hiding under the ring at the gym when you started come knocking because he's obviously done something. Now, whether this was because he was trying to hide an addiction to another substance, which is the, which could be argued, or is it just? I mean, how many of you guys work out just in general? Like, do you guys take any supplements? Do you guys take any vitamins?
I work out for baseball.
Yeah.
But I don't take shit. I work out naturally with like a weight room or whatever.
Vitamins and maybe protein.
Okay, I take a
When I was a kid, I took fucking those little
Flintstones vitamins.
Flintstone vitamins.
I mean, I take a fair few supplements. That's just because I'm into like weightlifting and shit.
All right, show
so
off.
I'm taking. I mean, I'm not that hench, but you know, I understand that when you look at the back of one of them fucking protein tubs, how many of you guys on there have ever looked at one and you thought, I ain't got a fucking clue what that is?
Right.
I don't know what the fuck that is. You know what I mean? So
if you look at the back of some Cheez-Its, you get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and a lot of the time, how do you know that what they're saying on there is even the right thing? What they're actually putting in there. So, you know, you're a professional fighter. You might go to your dietitian or nutritionist and say, all right, hook me up with something that's going to help me better. You know, how do you know? They're not whacking in shit. They might be whacking in stuff to say, hold on, if my fighter does really well and I put some shit in there that helps him, I'm going to get more money and I'm going to benefit from it.
Exactly.
So, you know what I mean? It might be microdosing, not from John Jones intentionally, but from his team around him. And I think he has changed up his team recently, which I think is a smart move because it eliminates that possibility.
Yeah.
And he's clean at the moment. The results from the testing on the fight day and the days leading up haven't been released yet. So there is a possibility that it might be popping any time now. But at the end of the day, it might have been not Jones doing it himself intentionally, but it might have been other factors around him that led to him ingesting substances that may have had these effects on him that he didn't even know about, which is a possibility, like I said. But at the same time, when you're hearing stories of him hiding under the fucking ring trying to get away from USADA,
Right.
It doesn't sound good.
You know, yeah, it doesn't sound good. He's not hiding under there because he's playing fucking peekaboo. He's trying to hide some shit.
And another thing that bothers me with the whole like condemning of John Jones, the same people, it feels like the same people who are grabbing their torches and pitchforks for John Jones are the same people who are like making TRT Vitor memes and want him to go to Ryzen and fucking juice to the gills.
Fucking Uberim.
Right. So, but yeah, I think we've covered just about everything we can cover on John Jones. You right?
I think you put John Jones on more. You have him take a fucking lie detector test.
That's been done.
Yeah.
He did a polygraph test and passed. He said that he's never ever taken anything that's that he never taken anything that he knew was illegal in terms of from USADA, not actual illegal substances. And apparently he passed with flying colours. I mean, depending on where you stand on the legitimacy of polygraph tests, you know, you take him what he will. But you know, that's some evidence in itself that maybe he actually hasn't done anything consciously to benefit himself. Maybe this has all just been a bunch of misunderstandings of him taking shit that he didn't even know he was taking.
Yeah, and now it's a waiting game to see if he tests positive again.
I do think everybody can agree that John Jones can be a little more careful, though.
Yes, he definitely can.
Yeah.
But moving on to the co-main, we have a new greatest female fighter of all time in Amanda Nunes, without a doubt, right?
Yeah, 100%. I don't think there's even an argument.
Yeah, because she took out the two best female fighters before her in a total of 99 seconds in incredible fashion, especially Cyborg.
She's the 145-pound champion by beating Chris Cyborg. She won the 135-pound belt by beating Miesha Tate, and she beat Ronda Rousey after that. She's also got 2 wins over the 125-pound champion, Valentina Shevchenko.
Yeah.
And she beat Durandamy and Shayna Baszler.
Right.
Who Shayna Baszler's a name in NXT, which is like WWE's developmental.
Yeah.
So another UFC reject back to wrestling.
Right.
Who's a fucking killer over there, but you know that's predetermined. We ain't gonna go into that. And then Jermaine Durandamy, who likes to punch people after the bell.
Yeah.
Durandamy's a bitch, though.
Yeah, we're not Durandamy guys.
Not at all. The only chick for her to fight to leave zero doubt in literally anybody's mind is Holly Holm, and a lot of people want that fight for some reason.
Weren't they going to fight at one time? I have a vague memory of them two. They were going to fight.
It definitely feels like it should have been at least talked about at one point.
I've got a feeling that that fight got cancelled because it makes sense. She's number 2 in the division now.
Right.
Surely they.
I don't think that goes well for Holly Holm if that fight does happen, though.
No, not at all. But you know, you've got to see that fight.
Right. For sure.
We've got to see that fight first, and then. Fuck, dude.
I can't we all picked Cyborg. Everybody here did anyway. I thought it was going to be a typical Cyborg fight. I thought Nunes would look a little better, obviously, than the people we've seen Cyborg against in the UFC anyway, fucking Tanya Evinger and shit like that. But I still thought that Cyborg was going to do what Cyborg does. And Nunes went in there and Cyborg.
I think that she dragged Cyborg into way too much of a brawl way too early on, and she got caught first.
I forgot.
I think that's what happened, and instead of just covering up, she kept throwing, and she got cracked 4 or 5 more times.
I forgot what Rogan said, but he had a perfect analysis. It's like, I think he said something like she kicked him, and then right after that moment, like it sparked Cyborg and like pissed her off type of thing, and that like it took the technical out of the game.
Yeah.
But it was pure emotion from that standpoint. When you land a shot on Cyborg, she's not used to it, and then once you get the emotion side, she's gonna leave shit open. That's why she got knocked the fuck out.
It was a stand and bang kind of thing. Like, you ever seen that video where Holloway points to the center of that ring with that guy, and for the last 10 seconds they're just throwing bombs?
Right.
It was look of the draw at that point. It was a fucking Western shoot off, and
Cyborg
Nunes
just
had a fucking big ass gun, and Cyborg
exactly. She just got caught.
Is this a
and I'll tell you
war?
what, Cyborg has got a fucking chin on that bitch, man. I mean, she fucking got smacked, tried to go down, couldn't get back up, and then kept taking bombs.
Right.
I mean, fuck me, she took it better than Rousey did.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's not even a question.
Head movement.
Everyone. Oh shit.
And the thing, like, Cyborg's biggest asset is she's a very good technical striker with insane power. And she let Amanda Nunes drag her into a brawl, and she got knocked the fuck out because of it.
Exactly right.
And maybe she would have got knocked out anyway because Amanda Nunes obviously has fucking cannons in her hands.
Yeah.
Do you think this
I
was
would
like?
like that fight on the ground as well. That fight on the ground would have been fucking
Yeah.
sick, because they're both really, really good at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I don't know, it would have been a nice switch up, because they're both known for their stand-up game, but they've all got that in their back arsenal because I've never had to fucking use it that much.
Right.
I have a question for you, Simon.
Go ahead.
I've said this on the show a few times, and I want to know your take. I assume that every single Brazilian MMA fighter in the UFC is good at jiu-jitsu, just because of where they're from. What's your take on that?
I think because there's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a lot of people think that, but there's other variations of Jiu-Jitsu as well.
Yeah.
There's like Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, I just assume every Brazilian is good enough on the ground that if it goes there, they're not to be messed with.
I think it might be one of them sports that are just very well done over there. I don't know. I'm not Brazilian myself.
Right.
I've never been to Brazil. I don't know.
I think it's just something that
Simon is not stereotypical.
Yeah, he isn't, and I really appreciate you for being honest about it. But I feel like it's the same way that a lot of people assume that Americans that make it to the UFC are very good wrestlers, which, I mean, more times than not, they are.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of any Brazilians that are not good at jiu-jitsu.
I can't think of any that are necessarily bad, but like
I feel
I don't
like
think we've
Thiago
seen-
Santos is a
good.
monster on the ground, but I mean he can knock you out with his hammer fist, so it doesn't matter.
Where the fuck's is Barbosa from?
yeah.
He's got some pretty good BJJ.
But he's not like a
Wait, is he like a brown belt in jiu-jitsu as well?
Yeah, I think so.
Let me. I'm gonna Google live on air.
So, do you think this was Nunes' strategy, or like,
Oh
what,
shit!
as soon as it started, this is how it's played out?
I think Nunes' strategy is to hit you as fucking hard as she can, and she hits fucking hard. So when she fucking hits you, you're going out.
Yeah.
So you don't think it was a strategy to like
Drag her
bring
into a brawl.
bring Cyborg into her? You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
bring the emotion out of Cyborg.
I think the way Nunes fights, it was kind of bound to happen that way.
Yeah, she did it against Rousey as well.
Right.
I think it was just kind of shooting her load before any kind of foreplay.
Right.
That's the way I describe that fight. She just went in, like, Cyborg wanted there, and she wanted to do a bit of foreplay with her, kind of feel her out a little bit. By the way, that's not because Nunes is a lesbian. I'm not making that reference. I'm using some anecdotes here, okay? But she just wanted to go in there and just... Excuse me, my house phone is going off.
You're fine.
They can shut the fuck up. Yeah, so Cyborg wanted to feel her out first, but Nunes was like, no, bitch, I'm going to fuck you up right now. And Cyborg just wasn't prepared.
Do you think Cyborg looked past Nunes a little bit?
Yeah, I think a lot of people were thinking that, though. I mean,
I
we all
honestly.
picked Cyborg, right?
Right.
No, everyone seems to always underplay Nunes. I
Yeah.
mean, we underplayed her against Tate, underplayed her against Rousey, and I'm like...
I thought she would lose the.
I picked
tape.
against her in all three of those fights.
I probably did myself too.
I picked against her, yeah. So I think now we can all say that we should all start picking fucking Nunes.
Yeah, and I can't think of anybody who I would pick over her now.
Right.
Holly Holm's probably the next best like challenger, and I don't think that's even.
I think
fight,
Holm goes to
honestly.
sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the best challenger is somebody that will bring her to the ground and hold her there.
I think the best challenger
Even
is going to be Chris Cyborg again, just a rematch.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think about? Do you think they should go that route? Do you think it should be an immediate rematch? Because she
No.
got knocked the fuck out.
She shouldn't have any
Yeah.
rematches. That's not fair.
But then again, I mean, Ronda Rousey did, and she got murked.
She had a long-ass layoff after, I feel like. Though.
Exactly. I think that.
I don't think Cyborg's going to want that layoff.
And Cyborg, her contract is up too. I believe.
Yeah, but I saw
It's
her
got
on Twitter
one fight
campaigning for it too. So maybe she wants to re-sign.
You
to
said
try
one
to
fight left, Simon.
She's got one fight left.
Oh, okay.
And she's on. I think it was 163 months that she went undefeated. I don't think she lost this decade.
No, it was
Now-
13 years that she went
That's
undefeated.
insane.
That's fucking like. Who
And
the
she was
fuck
still all
else
class
deserves-
afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
Hugged
Who
her
the
and
fuck
everything.
deserves an immediate rematch more than her? I mean, Rousey got an immediate rematch after absolutely getting knocked the fuck out. Yeah.
Joanna
Yeah.
did.
And yeah, exactly. So and no, Joanna got a fucking rematch there, a rematch at another belt division, and probably will end up getting another one after that.
I think Ronda's
So-
knockout was worse than Cyborg's. Because
Mhm.
Ronda
Yeah.
afterwards, wasn't she like trying to fight the rest of referee?
Yeah.
Or the,
Yeah. And
yeah.
Ronda was like, at least Cyborg was in there landing shots of her own. Ronda didn't get anything off.
No, she looked like a deer in the headlights there.
After the fight, she was not herself. Afterwards, Cyborg was hugging Nunes, like congratulating her. So, but
They
I
even
also
sent Rousey
think
into fucking clinical depression for a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and plus, I think it's the UFC thinking that Cyborg and Nunes have no stock outside of UFC fans. I think Rousey's got stock outside UFC fans, so did Tate, kind of.
But that's the UFC's
Joanna
fault.
kind of has, but not majorly.
Right.
So I think that's why everyone's saying she's not going to get a rematch, because there's not that mainstream draw kind of thing, that they're not entitled to it. But I think it's complete and utter bullshit. Cyborg,
I think
Deserves.
that she, 100%. I think she deserves, and I think she will eventually get a rematch. Whether Nunes fights in between now and then, she might fight Megan Anderson, who just knocked out Kat Zingano. She might fight whoever is a challenger at 135. I can't think of anyone that's in the top 5 because they're probably all a bunch of bums compared to her.
in
but-
no way this rematch turns out the same way. I think it's a totally different fight. I don't think Cyborg gets knocked out in the first round. It could be a tactical war. It could.
I think it's the same fight. It's just whether it comes out with a different result. Because Cyborg definitely can knock out Amanda Nunes.
Yeah, if you ran that exact fight the way it happened 5 times or 10 times, it's probably 5-5 either way. It's just who lands that first strike.
yeah, man, that'd be. I want to see that fight 10 times.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Is there any?
I think it almost takes, like, they're obviously very skilled fighters, but I think it takes sometimes the luck of the draw, because she wasn't like throwing like tactical strikes. She was just
just
wailing it,
winging
and she
it.
happened to land on her chin, and it happened multiple times, obviously, to knock her out. So I think it's just like it's a situational type of thing.
It's like if you ever thought about the idea that if Conor and Aldo ran it back,
Yeah, we've talked about that quite a lot.
I don't want to think about that.
would it end 13 seconds again? So for my
yeah.
money, it wouldn't. I think that would go a completely different way.
I got a lot of listeners, a lot of MMA family over in the UK. Even one of them telling them I'm from Lutton. But honestly, you guys really aren't catered to like we are here on the East Coast or the West Coast, where it's 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and the cards start. Like you said last night, people are having to stay up into the early morning hours before they're getting ready to go to work, and they can't even watch the main event because it's already 6:30 a.m. there, which is unfortunate. So I give you guys a lot of credit. Nonetheless, let's dive face first into what we witnessed last night, one of the best cards of the entire year. As we get towards the end of this interview or the end of this discussion about UFC 231, we want to ask you guys in the chat room, and me and UFC News are going to definitely rate it ourselves out of 10. And I got to say, this is definitely going to be one of the higher ones I'm going to rate so far. And we're going to break down what makes a good pay-per-view card. Because, man, if you look at it, we're paying $13 a piece for every fight. And I really wish the pay-per-view model was at least a little different. I even threw it out there saying, why can't we just buy the co-main and the main event in a little bundle package for $20 or something like that? I feel like they'd sell a lot more pay-per-views.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm okay in the UK right now because, the guy over from Luton who's in the chat, shout out to him. I know where you're at. Yeah, we get it over for free over here if you have if you subscribe to a certain provider. So I got BT Sport, and they give you UFC for free.
Damn.
Which is
awesome. So I've still got a bunch of UFC pay-per-views recorded that I like. So I've still got, for example, 205 recorded, because sometimes I like just go back and watch that. 202 still recorded, 217 still recorded, 223 I've still got all on my VCR, as you guys would call it, just recorded on there, so I can just go back and watch that anytime if I didn't want to go watch it online. So yeah, it makes it really easy for us in the UK to watch it if you can bother to pay the subscription service to that certain provider, which is Virgin Media. But yeah, dude, I completely agree with you, especially, say, for example, for more international views for fans, or, say, for example, you guys over in the US. If you guys, a lot of people aren't into the big, into like the other main card events or the prelims, and a lot of people just want to watch the co-main event or even the main event. And I think that's something that should change from the international pay-per-view model. A lot of people just buy cards now before the main events. I mean, look at the May-Mac fight. How many people bought that card to watch all those other fights? I didn't. Did you? Did you watch the Mayweather-McGregor fight?
The Mayweather-McGregor fight? Of course I did. Of course I had to.
Yeah, same. Did you buy the card, and could you name me anyone on that card apart from Floyd and Conor?
Before the fight, I definitely couldn't, but afterwards, one thing that stood out was that guy walking out in the co-main event with that big blue fuzzy coat and shorts on. Yeah. That's the only thing that stood out. I'm not a big boxing fan, man.
I'm the same here, and me and my mates joked about, like, oh my god, it's a fucking Cookie Monster. What the fuck?
Yeah.
We'd had a few beers at that point, and it was like 4 a.m., so you can forgive me for the shit banter, but yeah. So yeah, that's something that could possibly change in the future, Or even, say, for example, why do you have to actually pay for it anymore? You've got them sponsorship deals, and it's the age of the internet now. Why couldn't they live stream it on YouTube or on Twitch or on UFC.com? And maybe if you pay a little bit here and there, why not? They'd probably pull in a lot more numbers than the traditional pay-per-view layout that's already out there now.
I mean, $70 I had to pay last night for the card. And you know what? There's a lot of fights where, like, one thing I don't understand about the UFC, it's like, in boxing, there's one thing that you can count on. It's probably that the fights are going to get better and better as the fight goes on. Last night, for instance, for the prelims, we had Eric Anders going up against Elias Theodorou. I'd much rather have had that on the main pay-per-view card over the prelims. 100%.
Yeah. Or, like, say, the Bosniak fight. That a lot of people that I spoke to today, they weren't high on that fight. So maybe, so it really depends on how the people fight on the night. And I mean, it's the problem with the UFC right now is that they have a lot of people on their roster, and it's hard to kind of find. There's a lot of gems on, like, the prelims and on the early prelims as well. So, and then they get to the main card. So it's really, really hard to keep up with everything. Like, I'll be honest with you, I don't watch the prelims. I don't know about you. I just don't have the time. Like, it's 1 a.m. and I'm trying to get sleep, and then I usually wake up around 3, half 2 to kind of like wake myself up before the main card. So I don't really get to watch the prelims unless there's like raving about it the next morning, and I'll wake up and I'll watch those fights specifically. So yeah, a lot of people just get lost in the shuffle for my money, and I think that's one of the problems of having such a stacked roster. But yeah, that's another issue entirely.
Because Max Holloway struggling to make 145 pounds. This is what you see year after year as fighters grow into their body, especially Max, who's been in the UFC for years now, came in as a young kid, developed finally, and at some point, fighters move up a weight class because it's just too much for them to make a weight class like 145 pounds. Look at Conor McGregor. He had to do it. He looked awful at 145 pounds. His coach was saying, there's no way I want to see him go through that again. Max Holloway, I think you can make a case for him moving up. But then there's guys like Tony Ferguson, who was calling him out. Max Holloway was supposed to even fight Khabib Nurmagomedov at UFC 223. Like, I was there in Brooklyn for that, the night that Conor McGregor threw that dolly through the bus window. But it's just so hard for me to wrap my head around that. Max Holloway, 145 pounds, and that's the argument. People are saying, is he the greatest of all time at featherweight? But have people forgot about Jose Aldo and what he did in the WEC going into the UFC? The only featherweight champion that the UFC had. The only featherweight for 10 years. 10 years he did it until Conor McGregor came around.
Yeah, I totally agree with that statement as well. And it's kind of like we're witnessing history in the making
Yeah.
at this current moment in time, and it's kind of hard to right now say whether or not we can classify Holloway as the best ever featherweight. And I think the issue that gets brought up as well is a lot of people right now who are big fans of MMA never saw that old Jose Aldo. They've only ever seen that clip of him getting knocked out in 13 seconds by Conor.
Such
Because
a
the MMA
shame.
community has grew so much since that point, since because Conor brought in, and so did Rousey, so did Jones, brought in a lot of fans, and we're talking millions of people. And a lot of people right now have never seen Aldo perform at such a high level that would make them want to argue that. So I think that's something that a lot of people in the MMA community could do. Why not go back and watch some of his old fights? I mean, I'm someone that would have to do that as well because I saw him a few times before the Conor fight, and that's why I was hyped up for the fight. I started watching MMA in 2011 or 2012. Because the first ever fight I saw was Weidman Silva. That was the first ever fight I saw. So I saw a bit of Jose Aldo, but not too much. And then obviously the big main event as well, with Conor. So I personally could go back and look at that because right now I'd argue that Holloway is one of the best of all time because he beat Aldo twice. But is that really the Aldo of old?
I'm
Or
glad
is
you brought that up. That's what
Yeah.
the chat room's saying right now. This is coming from Pulse Resurrected saying, of course Max is the best 45er ever, ... He's already lapped the division. But has he? Like, was this Jose Aldo at his best? Well, you can even say Jose Aldo is only, 32 years old still right now? An old 32 years old. But let's be real, guys, for a second. Any fighter after Conor McGregor or Max Holloway, he beat. Look what Jose Aldo did to Frankie Edgar. Look what Jose Aldo did to Jeremy Stevens recently. I mean, this is a guy who is still very relevant and a threat in the top of this division as well. And Max beat him not once but twice. And I doubted Max throughout both of those fights. I've doubted Max for a while now. And last night was the first time I really took Max and trusted him, man. And he definitely delivered. Now the big question is, what's next for Max Holloway? What would you like to see Max do next?
Yeah, I mean, dude, just on that point, I agree. Like, right now, I've got Max Holloway's list up of people that he's fought, and dude, the names on there, it's just a list of stars in the MMA world that everyone in this chat and I think around the MMA community respect unto themselves. Jeremy Stevens, Lamas, Anthony Pettis, a former champ in his own right, Aldo, as we've mentioned. People like Cub Swanson as well, Oliveira, Stevens, like I said. So, dude, it's arguable. It's arguable that you could say Holloway is the best ever, but you'd have to sit there and really look at who did Aldo beat, and then who is Max Holloway beat, and then obviously you'd have to take their fight into consideration as well. But I think right now, if Max Holloway went away and went up to lightweight, he would be considered the best featherweight of all time, if not one of the best featherweights of all time.
So what does Brian Ortega do? I mean, honestly, this really isn't a step back. And if you're Brian Ortega right now, you can't be hard on yourself because, man, you gave the fans what they wanted. The featherweight division for so long, Conor McGregor said it, they were always on the prelims, unless it was Jose Aldo. Every featherweight fight was on the prelims. So at this point, at this day and age, to have a pay-per-view headline by Max Holloway and Brian Ortega, anytime in one of Brian Ortega's last fights, if he grabs the neck, like people go crazy. You can't count the guy out until the last couple of seconds of the fight, pulling things out like Yair Rodriguez. I mean, he's one of those guys who remains a threat. Definitely deserved his spot. So if he thinks for a second he didn't deserve the title shot, I disagree with him. But I like you said, I don't think this is going to be the last time that we see these two face off.
Yeah, dude, and I completely agree. And I think right now the best bet for Holloway is to go up to 55. And Ortega, I think right now he needs to hone his craft a bit more. And I think the best place to hone his craft as a stand-up artist and as a mixed martial artist overall is to right now stay in the 45-pound division, because it's arguable that the 45 division is, it presents a lot less of a challenge for Ortega, because that 55-pound division, man, that is a fucking elite of the elite of mixed martial artists. If you look down the top 10, all of them are masters of martial arts in their own right. And I think right now, Ortega should probably stay down at the 45-pound division
maybe, you know, maybe win that belt as well. I think if he goes up against Jose Aldo, that'll be a good fight if he goes there. Or say he, you know, maybe fights Jeremy Stevens for the strap, or whatever they want to do. But so yeah, I think Ortega, stay down 45, hone your craft. You're still young, you know, get some wins under your belt, and keep on moving up. And then with Holloway on the other hand, I'd say it's right now about time he goes up to that 55-pound division. There are so many matchups at 55 for Holloway that are dream matchups for MMA fans. I mean, you guys over in the chat, I can see you guys saying stuff about Max Holloway versus Diaz. And I mean, that would be an awesome fight unto itself. And I mean, Diaz is 9th ranked. Like I said, there are people in the top 10 who would make such an awesome fight. Ferguson as well, Khabib, Conor. That Conor rematch would be awesome. And that would be a great way for Conor to come back and fight someone that he'd care about, because, you know, that
at
fight
155.
Yeah, at 155. That would be an awesome fight. And Holloway wouldn't have to cut as much weight. You know, he'd have a lot more power about him. So, you know what? I'd like to see Holloway move up to 55, fight Ferguson, fight Conor, maybe even go for that champ with against Khabib.
I could see one of those two options happening, because those two were supposed to fight, like I said, in Brooklyn not too long ago. So, you know, and then Ally Quinta stepped in against Khabib Nurmagomedov. But at the time, I was like, I don't know if I want to see that fight. But now it's like Max definitely deserves that. And like people are saying in the chat room right now, they want to see him go up to 155. There are still contenders that are making their way up through the ranks. Scott Kenyon saying, you know, I'd still like Max to fight Zabit at 145. Imagine that somewhere down the road. That would be a really fun fight.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is a really, really good fight. Where's Zabit in the rankings?
He's probably top 10 at this point.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, we could Google that live on air, but yeah, sweet. So that, I mean, he's a good fighter as well, but I don't think he's gotten as much stock to fight for a title as of yet. You know what I mean? Like, you got to think of this from not just from an MMA perspective, but from a business perspective. You know, is Zabit that much of a name right now to warrant Dana White giving him a title shot against Max Holloway? You know what I mean?
I'd rather see. I'd rather see Max Holloway versus Conor next, honestly. If he's going to go up to 155 pounds, I think that's a good fight that you can make. That's going to bring in pay-per-view buys. But for Khabib, like, it's still, like, people are even saying in the chat, like, pump the brakes. Like, let's not get ahead of ourselves too quick. I don't know. I don't know what to think about it.
I mean, I don't think we're necessarily getting ahead of ourselves. I think that, you know, Max Holloway has been around for a while now in MMA, and has been a lot in the featherweight division. I mean, he's got how many wins under his belt in the featherweight division? The guy's done a lot in the featherweight division. He's beat Jose Aldo. He had a great fight against Conor. He's done a lot for the division as well. Like, he revamped that division after Conor left and made that title look prestigious again. And I think right now it's time for him to kind of think more about himself and let someone else take that reign as the 145-pound king and move up to somewhere he can have more, I don't want to say challenging, but more juicier fights for MMA fans to dig their teeth into, and kind of start picking off those dream matches that he has before he retires. Because, you know, he's 27, but in the fight game, it's kind of like any professional athlete. Once you kind of pass your 20s and early 30s, you start to decline. And I think it's time now that he moves up and starts taking all those really, really big, juicy fights that we all want to see and let him have before, you know, those guys move on in their career, or those guys retire or move up or move down. So I think right now it's about time that Max Holloway moves up and tries to get a two-weight division champ, or maybe even just have some of those dream fights and get some more wins under his belt. It's the fucking UFC, man. They were trying to put fucking Nate Diaz, who's 9th, against Dustin Poirier, who's 3rd. So whatever the fuck they want to do, man. You know, whatever sells pay-per-views at the end of the day.
I was actually into that fight. That was a fight that I was definitely excited for. But like you said, the rankings don't make any sense at all. Especially the females rankings. I mean, last night we had Jessica Evil Eye going against Chookagian, and Chookagian was like number 3 in the division, and Evil Eye number 12. And I know that Jessica, you know, has been hot and cold as well, but Chookagian to be that far up in the rankings is just like, are these? And I like Chookagian. I've interviewed her a few years ago when she first got signed in the UFC. There's nothing against her, but it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, for one of the reasons why I thought that fight was made is because it was gonna headline the MSG card, right? Or was that kind of
or was it just going to be that fight, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So the reason why I thought they made that fight, and I think it's a pretty good assumption to make, is the UFC in their minds were going to completely write off Dustin Poirier because they wanted Diaz to win that fight so we can call out Conor at the end of MSG, and then they can make Conor Diaz free.
That's what they were trying to do there. The winner was probably going to call out Conor McGregor. I mean, that was the narrative because both these guys want the rematch. Yeah.
And I was thinking that as well. In my mind, I think that the UFC also wanted Conor to beat Khabib. Like, they were thinking to themselves, right, in Dana's weird fantasy land and whatever he thinks about overnight when he goes to sleep, he probably thought Conor was going to beat Khabib, and then Diaz would beat Poirier, and then, oh, what's that? Is that Conor's the champ? And then, wait, what's this? Is it Diaz is in the top 3 rankings now, the lightweights? So we not only please the casual fans with a Diaz-Conor fight, but we also please the hardcore MMA fans with fights that, wait, get this, make sense in the rankings. Conor Diaz free for the lightweight strap. That's 4 million pay-per-view buys right there.
Easy.
You know
and they need it. And they need pay-per-view buys right now. I mean, the pay-per-view system, I've talked about it in nausea. Like, it's not working. It's not working. Something needs to change. ESPN, I know they're going to start a new ESPN thing, but now it's ESPN1, ESPN2. It's going to be the same shit that we saw on Fox. They need good, big fights. Big fights to get people off their couch to pay the $70, which is a lot every month. Next year they're going to be doing, instead of 13, they're going to be doing 12 pay-per-views, which is still $7 a month on top of your other charges that you have for being an MMA sports fan. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So last night was definitely a good reason to get people hyped, to want to spend their money. You got Max Holloway, you got Valentina, because there's one thing I really like about you is that you stay consistent. Every time there's news or something going on, you are there to post it. You stay professional. I feel like there's a lot of profiles out there that just fall off, disappear, or they can't stay professional, or they say something that they shouldn't say, and then people freak out about it. It seems like you definitely have a grip around the sport, and it's really cool that you're reaching out to podcasts and stuff like that. I think Instagram is definitely the way of the future when it comes to sports, because for people who don't even want to buy the pay-per-view, they can just wait a little bit, go on Instagram and see what's on there, see a little highlights and stuff like that. Not saying that you do that, but you definitely keep up to date with all the latest news and upcoming fights and stuff like that. So the floor is all yours at this point.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate the kind words, and I've always wanted to jump on podcasts before because I really enjoy this medium and the ability that gives people to be more expressive, because Instagram's a very written format, and a lot of people, the engagement rate on people just reading in a whole chunk of text is really, really minuscule. So I've always wanted to jump on podcasts, and I think right now I've got that size and that audience where I can bring something to the table, and I can express myself in a more audio format and a lot more elongated format.
I'll start with you, Simon. What were your impressions of the champ in the main event here?
I mean, the biggest thing that impressed me about Max Holloway in this fight is his fucking takedown defense in this fight. Everyone, honestly, I predicted Max Holloway via decision for this fight. Mm-hmm. I went against the grain. A couple of people that I spoke to on the old Instagram were telling me, how can you predict Max Holloway for this fight? Ortega's an absolute beast. He's just going to take him down and choke him the fuck out. And I was like, dude, Max Holloway is undefeated. Well, he's been undefeated for years on end for a reason. And in this fight, he displayed that he can handle ground, especially Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighters. His takedown defense was insane. There's a moment in the fight that just absolutely blows my mind when, Ortega is going for Max Holloway, and Holloway looks, he looks wobbled a little bit. And Ortega tries to take him down to the mat with a double leg. Ortega just shrugs it off. Ortega tries to jump on his back for a rear naked, shrugs him off as well. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, dude, this guy has come into this fight prepared. And that entire fight displays why Max Holloway is arguably, if not the greatest heavyweight of all time, because the cardio, he outdid Ortega. The amount of power he's got in his punches for a 145er is insane. And just the level of strikes that he's able to produce is impeccable.
Yeah, for sure. It was really an impressive performance. I was favoring Holloway before this fight because of the fact that Ortega gets hit in his fights very often. And the guys that he was able to knock out, he had a huge reach advantage over. So Frankie Edgar, most recently, he knocked out Clay Guida. But I believe he was losing the Clay Guida fight before he was able to knock him out, but he was able to use his range to put him away. And he's definitely got power. I mean, he caught Max a couple of times and clipped him, but he just couldn't keep up with the pace. As far as the takedown defense, Max Holloway has always had really good takedown defense, somewhere around 60%, which is really impressive. And then Brian Ortega only has a 14% takedown rate going into this fight, so he's not a takedown guy. When he submits people, it's usually like jumping guard, like he did with Cub Swanson, or he gets taken down. This is the problem when you have really high level jiu-jitsu, but you don't have wrestling. So if things aren't going your way on the feet, your only option is to pull guard. And, I think Max Holloway panicked a little bit in those grappling exchanges. You could tell he really didn't want to be there, but he was really awesome at scrambling and getting out of it. Holloway doing a great job, not only with the takedown defense, but staying postured when Brian tried to jump guard. And how about calling the finish? When he pointed at him and he said, "You're going down in this round," and then Ortega couldn't answer the bell for that fifth round, the doctor had to step in. So
I mean, he probably knew about that when he was when he walked to his corner for that fight, because those like last 20, 25 seconds of that fight, Ortega was just not doing anything. Yep. And then he from what I remember, he clinched him up, and then he was just going to town on Ortega, and he was done at that point. He wasn't defending himself. And if that fight, that is the epitome of saved by the bell, because if that fight had gone on for another 10, 15 seconds, the ref would have had to have walked in anyway. So you're glad that that the ref stopped, the doctor stopped that fight, because if that would have gone into a fifth round, that would not have been a pretty fight. Even Dana White in the post-fight interview press conference said that he's glad that the doctor stopped that fight, because if that went on even longer, you're thinking longevity-wise, fight another day, Ortega. You're still an up-and-comer. You're still young as fuck. Just, just take the L right now. Come back even stronger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, there's the thing that does impress me about Ortega, though, is not only his toughness and endurance in that fight, but his boxing. A lot of people have kind of upped it about how he uppercutted Frankie Edgar. Like his boxing in here, uppercutted. Yeah, he went like his boxing. It really impressed me tonight because he's known as a jiu-jitsu guy. He's always promoted as this jiu-jitsu masterclass, but he's there and he's going with Holloway. He's going punch for punch with Holloway. I know Holloway outclassed him, but he was still there. You know what I mean? He wasn't just standing there taking punches. He was throwing some fucking bombs himself.
Yeah, for sure. Ortega's got some striking, and I'll be interested to see what's next for him. I think there's some interesting matchups for him at 145 there. I don't know how much longer Max Holloway will stay at 45. He's had some issues with making weight. I know Tony Ferguson called him out, which would be an awesome matchup. That would be like a dream fight right now. So there's a lot of fun things for both of these guys in the future. I think a Jeremy Stevens, Brian Ortega fight would be awesome.
Or an Aldo Ortega fight. I mean, I want Ortega to go to 155. I mean, I know that he always got slack for the weight cut, but for weight issues, and I can't remember any time before the Khabib matchup where that got brought up. I don't know if you guys know about that at all. Like, is the weight concerns with Holloway only surrounding that Khabib fight?
Yeah, and there was also when he was supposed to fight Ortega the last time, it wasn't clear whether it was a weight issue or if it was a concussion issue. They said they're investigating it, and they gave some fluffy PR responses to that. But before we wrap up, Simon, I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned how you only keep track of the UFC news, and I follow your Instagram account obviously, and I see that you're always you're always on top of the news, which is it's impressive because there's always so much going on. I never keep up with anything. My whole thing on here with MMA on the Rocks is I kind of sit back and let other people break the news while I have a beer, and then I react to it. It's just kind of my thing. It's what Jeff and I do here. We're not breaking the news. We're we're enjoying the news while we're enjoying some adult beverages. But how do you find the time and how do you keep up with all this stuff, especially when the UFC obviously is based in Las Vegas, you're in the UK. So when this news is breaking, obviously you're posting about it, but I mean, you got to be up all hours of the night to keep up with this stuff. So to boil it down, the question is, how do you keep up with all the breaking news in the UFC?
To summarize, it's a fucking hustle. That is the only way to summarize it. On my lunch break at work, first thing I do is go on my phone, what's happened, post about it. Luckily, the time difference to like the East Coast isn't too bad. So like, on my lunch break, it's like 9 o'clock in the morning for the East Coast. So a lot of the news outlets kind of break any news that they got, any kind of sources. So as soon as they get that, I'm straight on that. Like, okay, let's get that news out there. Let's get the people knowing what's happening. Making my content interactive in that sense, because I do have a lot of people from Europe who are subscribed to, who follow me on Instagram. So I'll do like polls about UFC, I'll do opinions, I'll reply to comments. Just even if there's nothing going on, I'm always trying to do something. So it's that dedication to the grind of always trying to be on top of the news. In terms of staying up for fights, that's a hustle unto itself, because a fight will finish at 6 a.m. in the morning, and I'm live posting it, and then I've got to go to bed. I'll sometimes even stay up and watch the post-fight press conferences. So I won't go to bed when everyone else is waking up. I'll sleep for a few hours, wake back up, start my day around midday on a Sunday. It's a fucking hustle. Like, I tried to do it for this fight, but I fell asleep because I'd been rock climbing in the day in yesterday, and I ached all over. I was like, okay, you know what? I'll have a nap. Slept for 12 hours, missed the entire fight. I said to all my followers, sorry, I didn't cover the fight, but I'll cover the news that's coming out since.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's that hustle of just always trying to be on top of the news. And the hardest thing to do as well is always remaining credible. One of the things that I always struggle with and I always hate on Insta is biases from people on different accounts. So like my biggest pet peeve is like Conor and Khabib fanboys. They do my fucking head in. You don't even know. I still get people commenting, Conor is king. King of what? Khabib is the best of lightweight, yeah, but not pound for pound. You know what I mean? Like I hate it when people jump on bandwagons, and that is my biggest pet peeve in MMA. Fucking bandwagon jumpers. That grinds my gears to the point. Like, I'll get people commenting to me, yeah, Conor's still the best though because he did all this. I'm like, yeah, he did that. He hasn't done it since. Like, are you just watching reruns of 2015, 2016? It's nearly 2019, bro. There's that, and then there's remaining credible. So try, like, I always, like, any comments that I'll do, that's all me. But then any posts that I do, I always try and just say, this is what's happened. This is the fact of all. That's what's being reported. Anything else, that's opinion. That's being theorized. Trying to always do credible sources as well. So for me, my philosophy in this is I'll check at least 3 news sources before I post a piece of news. Because you get a lot of news that runs about that you don't know what's going on, or it's just hearsay, which is a struggle that I have when I first started off. I'd just check one main source or one news source, and then it'll come out, that's fake, that's wrong, that's fake. And it still happens now. Also, I'll still sometimes a lot of people will report news and it's fake, and I'll get comments and people will say that's been misreported, that's not how it is now. And I'm like, okay, that this post is like 2 hours old. Okay, I'll take that down. I'll post up a new one saying previously I put da-da-da. You know what I mean? So like I said, it's consistency, it's the dedication that I'm 5, maybe 8 hours behind sometimes, and you just got to stick to it and do the grind, because if you ever want to kind of grow into an actual news source that people want to rely on, this is the advice I give to accounts that message me mostly when they say to me stuff like, how do I grow as a news source, or how do I grow an MMA news account? Just say consistency, dedication, and be nice. That's it. Dedication, consistency, and be nice, because there was this guy that commented and asked me about it, and he had like 100 followers or something like that. And I was like, okay, you're posting regularly, you're doing it there. Went to his comment section. Someone criticized some fight. It was like, fuck you, cunt, you fucking da. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing, man? Like, you want these people to follow you. They want people to care about your opinion, and you're being a cunt. Yeah. So, dude, be nice. Have your opinions, but just say it in a nice way. I go for sarcasm. So, but
Yeah. Yeah, kill him with sarcasm. I'm a fan of that strategy. So that sounds like a lot of work, and I'd prefer to leave it to guys like you to do that, and I'll just be here to comment on it when the news breaks.